gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day I die.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here. Found an interesting deck on the interwebs. It's Photon Sanctuary Control. Going to talk about it a little bit because I haven't really seen anything like this in the States or Japan. It's a control deck. It kind of feels like, if you play it, it kind of feels like a weird combination of Chaos and Monarchs. Like, it has that Monarch feel where you're making your plays, you're making your advantage off of tribute monsters, tributing, you know, useless fodder that would, or cards that would be useless in other decks, but that make great fodder in this deck. You're making use of cards like Enemy Controller to use your opponent's monsters, and just being able to control the board with stuff like Light and Darkness Dragon while investing minimal cards on the field. And then it also feels like that Chaos aspect of, you know, you're playing a whole lot of hand traps like Effect Veiler, you're playing the Chaos monsters even though you're not playing Chaos Sorcerer. And then when your cards are banished for things like Chaos Sorcerer, you have ways to still manipulate your remove from play pile to make advantage. Obviously in this deck it would be, you know, Torgal Levier plays when traditional Chaos would use something like Dimensional Alchemist. So I'm going to go over the deck list really quick and then start talking about the deck. 3 copies of Light and Darkness Dragon, 3 copies of Cyber Valley, 3 Effect Veiler, 2 Kaiser Glider, 1 copy of Zaborg, the Thunder Monarch, 3 copies of Tour Guide, 1 Sangan, 2 copies of Card Trooper, 1 BLS, 1 Gores, 3 copies of Photon Sanctuary, 3 copies of MST, 2 Enemy Controllers, 2 Machine Duplications, and then the 1-ups. Monster Reborn, Book of Moon, Mind Control, Dark Hole, and Heavy Storm. We've also got the traps. Trap lineup, very minimal, like in both of those decks. 2 copies of Torrential Tribute and the Solemn Brigade. To start off, let's talk about Photon Sanctuary, what this card is and what it does. Photon Sanctuary is very simple. You get 2 tokens, they're Thunder, they've got 2,000 attack, they're level 4. And you can't use them for you can't use them for synchro, and they cannot attack. Although they come in defense position when you first summon them, which kind of sucks. And you can't summon any other monsters that turn unless those monsters are light. Now, over half the deck is light, so that isn't going to be that big of a problem. Light and Darkness Dragon. Light and Darkness Dragon is one of the best cards in the format that nobody really plays, because when you look at decks like Insectors and Windups, decks that are made up of very small monsters that have very, you know, volatile effects, like whether they can blow up the field or blow up your hand, those cards have, or those decks have a really big problem with Light and Darkness Dragon. I mean, this is a card that isn't great against Heroes and Rabbit, but this card can utterly destroy things like Insectors. Now, speaking of the Rabbit matchup, because it probably is the #1 matchup, same thing about Heroes because they're becoming ever so popular now. Kaiser Glider. Way back when in Dark Crisis, this card came out, and it never really saw any play, but I think it's a pretty good card now. In fact, if I was running Frog Monarchs, I'd run this card now because this card is ridiculous in the Rabbit matchup. Here's why. Kaiser Glider says that when it's sent or when it's destroyed and it goes to the graveyard, bounce 1 card or bounce 1 monster from your opponent's side of the field to the hand. In fact, it doesn't even say your opponent's side. It can be either field. You're going to use it on your opponent's monsters. Here's why that's good. Because when you get this guy on the field, if they have something like Solemn Warning, or they Solemn it, or they use Logia or whatever, it doesn't matter. It will still activate. Hell, if I had this in my hand and you crush carded me, this bitch would still activate. That's why it's good. So if your opponent uses something like Logia on it, you can just bounce Logia to their hand. You still get your 1-for-1. You know, you can summon this guy when your opponent has Stratos, or your opponent has like Neos plus the Shining. Attack over their Neos. If they use Gemini Spark, then you can bounce their Shining to their hand, or you can just use it as a defense for Shining. It works under Skill Drain. This card is just really good. Zaborg was just kind of thrown in here. Basically, you want 3 1-tribute monsters. I mean, it can be 3 Zaborgs. It can be 3 copies of Kaiser Glider. You know, it's just basically your decision. Now, Photon Sanctuary is going to be the card which is going to be powering all these plays. The Lads, the Kaiser Gliders, the Zaborgs, those are going to be easily, they're going to be hitting the field pretty easily because of Photon Sanctuary. But obviously, you want to give more uses than just Photon Sanctuary. So we added in the Cyber Valleys, which can be used for, which can be used for, you know, removing it, getting more draw support, and you can even go Effect Veiler, get your Photon Sanctuary tokens, and then make an instant Mistworm. In fact, if Trishula was still out, that would be an amazing play, don't you think? Because let's say your opponent had like Sangan on the field, you go Photon Sanctuary, summon Effect Veiler, trish that bitch. Now, since you're going to be removing stuff with Cyber Valley and potentially BLS, you add the tour guides in there, not only to open up Exceed plays, but mainly just for like Leviair recycling, stuff like that. Another interesting card in here, again, just to abuse Photon Sanctuary, is Enemy Controller. You go like Photon Sanctuary, take your opponent's big monster, take something like their Shining, tribute both of those mothers for Light and Darkness Dragon. Again, their Shining will miss the timing. Take their Lagia, their Shining, their Insector, you know, Hornet, whatever, and tribute it for Light and Darkness Dragon. Just start whooping their ass. We have Gores in here because we have a minimal trap lineup. Machine Duplication works perfectly in this deck. The reason why, because we run Cyber Valley and we run Card Trooper. Card Trooper didn't initially fit in this deck, but you kind of make it fit because you have 5 targets for Machine Duplication. If you hit the Cyber Valley, obviously you can draw a mess of cards. Again, you can play something like Photon Sanctuary, Econ, take your opponent's big monster, remove it for Cyber Valley. Next turn, play Tour Guide, get your Cyber Valley back. Works with Mind Control too. Same thing with Card Trooper. Card Trooper is amazing in this format. It answers turn 1 Stratos, Thunder King, Neos, Sabersaurus, Kabuzais. Like, it answers a whole lot of monsters. If your opponent has Lagia, you just set Card Trooper, draw another card until you can, you know, get into the position where you can do some stuff like that. Trap lineup is minimal. I mean, you don't even have to run Solemn Judgment in this deck. You could probably find something else like a personal tech card. But the 2 Torrentials, you know, just about everything in this deck is, you know, the Card Troopers are floating, you know what I mean, the Tour Guide, Sangan. You won't have to use Torrential if you have like a Cyber Valley on the field. You can just sit on it, wait for them to attack over, next turn use Torrential. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting deck. Again, it's kind of like if Chaos and Monarchs like had a baby, this would be it. One card that I did actually consider in this deck was Treeborn Frog, but then I realized like you don't have enough milling power, you don't have enough dumping power or anything like that to really get the effectiveness out of it. You'd have to run something like Foolish, which would only work with that card, and it would add 2 cards to the deck. So, yeah. If you guys have any suggestions or you guys have any questions on this deck, just let me know. The extra deck I don't have shown, but I mean, it's pretty basic. I mean, you're going to be running, you know, like a few synchros like level 5, level 9 because of the Effect Veiler plays. I would probably run like a Formula Synchron in case you have some situation where you're going to want to use Formula Synchron instead of using Cyber Valley's effect for whatever reason. And then the rest will probably just be like rank 3s and rank 4s, maybe like 1 or so rank 4. I guess that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know what you think of the deck, and thank you for watching as always.